I plead. Just put the weight of the world on me, 'cause I got the will to believe. And I'm looking for mercy. Have you seen her with diamonds in the sky? It's sweet, the days will never die. So come and fade into the sun. Let me believe that I am the so wide awake but not moving forward. My eyes got something to say. I'm in the shame and I'm breathing shallow. Good, I'm high anyway. And I'm looking for mercy. Have you seen her with diamonds in the sky? It's sweet, the days will never die. So come and fade into the sun. Let me believe that I am the
All right, welcome back. Got still in our summer attendance mode, which is everybody's getting in those last bits of preschool or whatever, summertime vacation. So that concentrates power in the hands of those who are here. So here's your opportunity to exercise that power. I'll do this now because I always do such a bad job at allowing time for this at the end. But topic for next time that we would like to take. I'll put up kind of the triumvirate that we talked about last time as one option. Anything else on which includes this one, so 4, not 3. Or is there another one or anything that anybody wants to add to this list?
We can't read it, it's too small.
Oh, sorry, okay. This is what I got for now. And now the writing is not helping you at all.
Are we saying we're tackling all 4 of those this week?
We're going to start tackling all 4 of those next time. Or we can do some other topic and then do those at a later date. These are, the reason I tied them together y'all weren't here last time. The reason I tied them together last time, as I said, they're so interrelated that by the time you adequately address one of them, you must have touched on significant portions of the others. I don't remember where this came in. This had something to do with the Avengers. But there was some specifics to this one that I thought might be interesting and support some good discussion. I think, okay, yeah. So thoughts, feedback, fire away. Which ones would you like to see next time?
I can't read them.
Good. All right, we've taken you out of the elections process by so much for franchise, right? Okay. Anybody? He who speaks first will probably win.
Is free will up there?
It is. Free will's always up there.
I vote for that.
Okay. One vote for.
So you've got like the first one, what is rebirth?
And how? Yes.
I think that would be an interesting topic.
These were Solid Ground submitted topics, so agreed. All of them are interesting ones. Is anybody dying to have one of them next, I guess is what I'm saying. Is anybody almost willing to raise their hand? They feel so strongly about it, you're almost willing to raise your hand and say, yes, I want to do that one next? Okay, go ahead.
I feel so strongly that these 3 plus 1 that we're going to tackle are probably going to take the next 4 weeks that I'm not worried about.
Okay, all right, well, we'll start with that one. And then Peter's got one on the list that we can put on there after that one. Yeah. What are you saying here exactly? No, it's a good thing. Yeah, that's what we're supposed to be doing. Okay, well, we'll start with those, but if anybody gets bent out of shape and says, yeah, we've talked about some of that before here, I want to hear this particular topic you haven't addressed, put it on Facebook and let us know.
What are those?
It's free will and man's nature. So the sin nature discussion is basically, do we have to be bad all the time, or all the time except for one, or is it possible to be good all the time? And then why does it matter? So this is the, well, at the end of the day, for the people who believe in determinism and the people who believe in free will or some compatibilism between the two, that everybody's got the same orders from God if you're a Christian, so why does it matter? There are good reasons it matters. And then the other, somebody had brought up the topic of taking every thought captive. So the Christian, and not even the Christian, the non-Christian, often has the thought to themselves, I think, that says, why do I, you and I have the same disorder. You know, we walk through the door and someone's nice to us right off the bat, and the first thing we think is, what's the matter with you? Why are you being so nice? I just want to punch you in your nice face. And then you say to yourself, and you're like, what is wrong with me? No, hopefully not that often, but if you've ever had an experience like that, you hope that your next thought would be something like, what is wrong with me? Right. So,
I told Scott this morning, these women who opened the door for you in the church, I just want to see how hard I can hit between their eyes.
so I was trying to represent Dennis's thought without pointing it out that Dennis is the guy that said that. But Dennis volunteered that one. If you've ever had one of those thoughts that you're like, that you say to yourself, you're like, good grief, where did that come from? There are those thoughts, let's call those the worst thoughts you can have. There are thoughts that you have on a consistent basis where you like get in an argument with the most consistent feedback I get from people in relationships or marriages when they say, you know, we fight all the time, or we fight some of the time, or we fight too often. And I say, what do you fight about? And what do they answer?
I don't know.
Yes, and you're like, wait a second. Here's the person that you've pledged your love to, that you're like, I give everything to you until as long as we both shall live. You know, everything is at your feet. By the way, we're going to fight about whether the salt or pepper shaker ought to be on the stove or whether it ought to be on the counter. Yeah, and you're saying to yourself, how is this the case? And then let's move all the way off onto just little stuff that you might say, you know, I wish I was more polite, or I wish I thought about doing good things more than I thought about doing selfish things. So, so taking every thought captive is the idea of how do I change my mind, soul, heart, whatever you want to do it, in such a way that my impulses are first good. And if anything, I'm always doing the right thing, and then some kind of temptation will come up, and then because I'm a doing the right thing kind of guy or gal, I can say, I see that, I don't want to do it for these reasons, and I'm going to move on and continue to do the right thing. But sometimes, I don't know if you've had this experience, it feels like we're more frequently bent towards doing the wrong thing. So you can see why all of these are interrelated, depending on what your doctrine of these things are. It's either a easy explanation deterministically, it's an easy explanation from an environmental perspective, it's an easy explanation. All of these have explanations of it, but then what do you do? It doesn't do you much good if you're like, well, I conclude that this is God's sovereign choice, and so I'm stuck here. But am I really stuck here? No, he also commands me to be good. Okay, what am I going to do about it? You're a free will guy. You're like, nope, okay, maybe it is the fact that I'm seeping in a culture that doesn't care about doing the right thing as much as it says that it does. How do I go about fixing this one? Which turns into, what do I do about it? So this is the what do I do about it angle, is taking every thought captive. Because that starts in your head. You don't want to wait to the point where you're having to do something about it. And then free will and God's will, are they contradictory? You can see how, hopefully you can see how those interrelate, but if it's everything that God wants to happen, does that mean that we don't actually have any choice? It's all matrix kind of stuff. You think you have a choice, but you don't. The architect and the oracle just got together and they set it all up for you. Yes, ma'am. I would like to talk about them in the past as well, but I have some causality problems. We intend to talk about these beginning next time. We were going to finish our choice stuff here, but in reality, if you notice the whole how do we change the way that we live, is directly interrelated to this topic. So maybe I'll just take the curtain aside and be like, yes, okay, it's all really one topic. We're splitting them into different subheadings here. So I'm going to say that we're continuing our topic from last time, but if you'd like to think of this as point one for this discussion, then you may certainly do so, and you wouldn't be wrong. Okay. I like going at it in the direction that we are, though, because we start with the practical. We're going to go back to the theoretical, and then we're going to come back to the practical again. But if you start with the theoretical, you end up doing self-fulfilling prophecy, in my opinion. This is the, well, my dad told me that he made these bad choices in his life, and I find myself making, in some of those same situations. Okay, well, did you find yourself in those same situations because you're genetically predisposed to do so? Or did you find yourself in your situations thinking, well, I'm trying to be as good or better than my dad. He had these difficulties, so I psychologically allowed myself to have these difficulties as well. How do you know? Well, it'd be really difficult to tease that out. That would take some significant work in order to do so. But it may be the case that it's the latter, in which case we don't want to do self-fulfilling prophecy. We want to come at it fresh as best we can. So in that vein, the question that we were asking last time, where I think if I remember correctly, we kind of ended, was how do we change our mindset, or how do we change our minds at all, and how do we change our mindset in a way that supports what we were doing, what we want to do, and maybe a way that it gets asked. I think we mentioned this last time, but if we didn't, here it is. How do we change what we want? Because some people think if I have two conflicting desires, and whichever is the one that I want more is the one that wins out. And I tried to argue against that last time by saying, well, in the dieting thing, it's not which one you want more. I gave you the kid with the marshmallow example. 1 marshmallow now, 2 marshmallows if you wait 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And it's always the case that they want, at least physically, they want that marshmallow now. And watching the kids is hilarious and also sad. But you can see that there are ways around it. And one of the ways that I gave you around it last time was distracting yourself from it. So it may be the case that you really, really want that marshmallow and you say, I don't know how to resist it. And the answer is, or you may say to yourself, if I just have to sit here and stare at that marshmallow, it's not going to work. That may be true. You may have accurately said that by the time 10 minutes clicks by, you're going to have given up and you're going to take the marshmallow and you'll eat it. Notice that this translates directly to alcoholism. If you have an alcohol problem, then the choice, if you don't want to fall off the wagon, you don't make the choice sitting in a bar. You make the choice when you decide whether you're going to go sit in a bar with your friends and not drink. So if you're a confirmed alcoholic and you say to yourself, I can probably resist it. I can probably resist it. I'm going to go hang out with my friends in the same scenario that I always have, that always ended up in me drinking. Then you sit down in that bar. In my opinion, you already made the choice. You gave up by going in there. When you're serious about changing, you act serious about changing. And I'll talk about serious change and superficial change. Serious change is a kid who is playing a sport. I know some folks whose kid just got selected, tried out for, or whatever. I don't know if it's the U.S. gymnastics team or like a large USA gymnastics type of team. I take it that the Olympic team is this tiny little group of this massive USA gymnastics team. Yeah. So I don't know exactly where they fit in there, but the bottom line is they got selected for what I would call the ludicrous level of gymnastics, where your life has now translated into we used to be a family, now we're a gymnastics organization support facility. Yeah, just hang around kids. You don't have anything to do, hang off the bar in your closet. When you see somebody, that little girl may have posters up of gymnasts. She may have watched the Olympics. She may have said, I'm interested in gymnastics. Or she may have said, I want to be like, I can't remember all the gymnasts today, but one of these famous gymnasts. Tennis. Mary Lou Retton was the one when I was a kid that I remembered that was the Olympics. She was on the Wheaties boxes. So the kid gets the cereal, Wheaties cereal, and I want to be like this person. And then they say, and how many young men wanted to be like Michael Jordan or LeBron James or whoever the big guys are now? If you if you say, okay, well, there are 1,000 kids that think that for every one kid that says I'm going to do something about it. So some people change. Some kid changes, says this gymnastics thing inspires me to go get involved in gymnastics in the first place. And then they put them there in an environment. Let's say they're in an environment where they walk around their school and there's a little placard on the wall on the bulletin board that says gymnastics tryouts or gymnastics camp this summer. And they say, Mom, Dad, I want to go to gymnastics camp. Why? Because they see this and they want to do it. And Mom and Dad either say, yes, we'll help with that, or they say, no, we're not going to do it. Now, some kids, when the parents say, no, you're going to take piano lessons, they end up taking piano lessons, and they always say, I wish I'd have been a gymnast. The ones whose parents support them, that starts another chain of choices. But the kid who ends up having to take piano lessons doesn't always end up just taking piano lessons. Sometimes they turn around and strike a deal with the parents and say, I want to end up doing this anyway. What do I have to do for you? And then the parents end up making some ludicrous deal that they think the kid won't do, and they let them go ahead. In my own life, it looked like this. I wanted to ride a motorcycle when I was a kid, and my dad, who's had, like everybody's dad, knows every person ever who's ever been injured on a motorcycle in the most gruesome manner possible. And he was like, no, you're not going to do it. And I thought, but I knew I wanted to ride a motorcycle. This was great. I thought I was clever. I went out and I'm 15 years old. And I pulled a bunch of statistics on auto fatalities and motorcycle fatalities. And I said, I realized that people of my age group that drove Corvettes, which I don't know who those guys were, none of my friends, people of my age group, 15 to 25 or whatever, that drove Corvettes, had the same fatality rate in accidents as motorcycles did. Probably because the Corvette, like the motorcycle, is going 130 miles an hour when it's involved in an accident. And I went to him thinking I was going to trap him. And I was like, Dad, if I save up my own money, I knew he was not going to participate in this. If I save up my own money, will you let me buy a Corvette? And he said, if you want to do that with your money, sure. I said, great, here are the stats. You know, they're just as lethal. Can I ride a motorcycle? He was like, no, that's a good point. I've changed my mind. You can't have a Corvette. And I was like, I did not see that coming. Checkmate, old man. And who knows whether he was serious. I was a little bit into archery as a kid, and they let me go to an archery range maybe 3 or 4 times in my life, and I was doing what every kid does, which is you kind of thwack, it hit the wall. That's generally good. Okay, kid. And Dad was finally like, one day he was like, okay, it's time to go home. And he was like, one last shot. And I was like, if I hit this shot, and I hit bullseye on this one. By the way, I hadn't seen the bullseye with an arrow yet in my entire life. Will you buy me a Corvette? And he was like, sure. And darn if it wasn't thwack. I mean, not even, it was on the line. It was like I'd walked down there and poked it right in the middle. And both of us get this look on our face like, what are we going to do about this? And we're both thinking furiously because he's like, I told him, and I don't go back on my word. And I'm thinking, there's no way that he can possibly support that. And actually, that would have been the move. I was too stupid at the time. But what I was like is, hey, how about instead you buy me a couple of these archery targets that I can shoot at? And he was like, yes, absolutely, I'll do that. So I knew he was going to get off cheap, but I figured I might as well try to get something for it. Because anyway. So this is parents can be supportive or non-supportive of things. This is the analog of an environment being conducive to or non-conducive to your choices. But my point that I'm making to you is, even in this situation, so the end of the motorcycle story is what? Anybody know the end of the motorcycle story? You know about me, you know who I am, you can probably guess about my will and determination. What's the first, and my dad was like, you can have a motorcycle, I will allow you to buy one, and I will give you a gift, a one-way bus ticket to wherever you want to go. When you buy one of those, like a joking, not as long as you're under this roof. Well, as soon as I was outside of the roof and reasonably could do so, I bought a motorcycle. And fortunately, by the grace of God, did not kill myself. Although I tried the advice I got on motorcycle driving, I'm not sure I was turned into a motorcycle class, was pretend that you're invisible and you'll be safe. I had to change that after driving in Portland, Oregon on a GSXR 600, Portland is not the city to do that in. It rains 270 days a year there. And the drivers are out of their minds. And I had to pretend, I changed my mindset to such a degree. This is the kind of things you have to do mentally to be safe.
You're not invisible, you're the enemy.
That 6 people a week were paid to attempt to kill me with a vehicle. Because as I watched their actions, I'm like, intentional homicide is all this could possibly explain this. Yeah, I mean, even negligence wouldn't have even explained some of the behavior. I was like, that guy had to be trying to kill me. And so you had to be careful. But at any rate, I made a choice there, and I put myself continually in the place that said I want to do this, and I eventually did do it against all the grain, against all of the suggestion. So all I mean to say is, don't ever say to yourself, my choices are determined by my genetics, my choices are determined by my environment. There are plenty of anecdotal evidence out there that that's not the case. Steve?
Just point out, like, can you define what is God?
Can I define what is?
God.
Say again. Bad? Bad versus good?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do, right?
Yes. As in, what's the difference between bad choices and good choices?
So, either define good or define God.
Yeah, well, with your permission, let me hold off on defining that for a second, because right now I'm only interested in defining whether we can choose at all, or how we make the choices that we make. Because, go ahead.
So, I think making a choice depends on whether you put God.
Well, making a choice for good and for bad, if you're saying it depends on whether you are good or you are bad, is that what you're saying? If you're good, you'll make good choices. If you're bad, you'll make bad choices?
My opinion is that demonstrating what is put in God is different than what life is.
Well, this is again. I'm gonna have to ask for your permission on this case, because I don't want to answer that question yet. I want to put the things that we're thinking about first out there before we talk about the frameworks in which we can think of them. Because my point to you, Steve, would be this, or my point to all of you would be this: you already hold a position. You either believe in free will and in such a way that you can completely determine what you want to do, or you believe in rigid determinism. You think you're making choices, but it's all an illusion. Or you think in some sort of compatibilist position of, I'm significantly predisposed to do these things, and without somebody else coming in and rescuing me, it's impossible for me to do the right thing. These are all frameworks. These are all doctrinal frameworks that tell you what to think about choices. I don't want you to come in here with your predetermined framework. I don't want me to come in here with my predetermined framework. What I want to do is talk about what is choice, how do we make choices, how do we make non-moral choices, how do we make moral choices. Steve, you're absolutely right. At the end, I'm trying to get to how do we make good choices instead of bad choices. What's the best way to do that? But if you come into it with your hands already up saying, I surrender, there's no way for me to make good choices, then you're not even going to consider whether you're right or wrong about that viewpoint. And in Solid Ground, part of what we want to do is examine the viewpoints to say, I know what my viewpoint is, but am I correct in it? Is it well-founded? So I'm talking about the foundations of these viewpoints first. Go ahead. You had something to say, I think.
Well, if we spend a lot of time to not around your head to figure out what's good and what's not, but ultimately there is no good that you can achieve.
Well, if I understand you properly, the ultimately question matters. So if you're coming into this saying ultimately there's no point in discussing it, well then let's just cancel the next 4 classes. What I'm trying to point out is, as I have in the past, viewpoints that I've held, religiously dogmatic viewpoints that I have held, turned out to be false. The way, and I think you would all agree that some of those positions I held were false. How do you go about, you can't go about getting rid of false beliefs or determining how true your true beliefs are if you're not willing to consider whether they're right or they're wrong. So I'm just saying, suspend your disbelief for a little bit and let us consider whether these choices are in fact makeable by the human being, and what is it to make choices in the first place. Peter, oh sorry.
The first question is, does God say in the Word of God?
Does God say?
In the Word or in God?
Well,
Does God give you a predisposition to good and bad?
yeah, but again, you're talking about the theoretical framework now. That's not the question we're asking yet. Now, if you want me to give you something to chew on in the meantime, then here it is. God looks at Job as Lucifer comes up and he says, have you considered my servant Job? He is righteous, blameless in how he walks. He is good. This is God telling Satan, Job is good. He is righteous and blameless. Blameless means no blame, means there's nothing wrong that Job has done. So at least up to that point, there's God saying this guy is good. Hebrews calls Noah righteous. In John and Elizabeth in the New Testament and Luke said that they were blameless they were righteous according to the law, blameless in their walk. So does the Bible say people are good? Absolutely, it says people are good. Does it also turn around and say people are bad? Yes, it absolutely says people are bad. And in fact, it says stuff that seems on its face to be contradictory. There are none who are righteous, no, not one, is a psalm that's also quoted in Romans. And then you've got in the Gospels people, and you've got even David, who's the author of that, saying, you will do X and X and X for the righteous, and for the wicked you will do A, B, and C. Well, it seems that David is affirming the reality of both the righteous and the wicked. And he's the guy that wrote, there are none who are righteous. So that's a contradiction. So there has to be an interpretation that helps us understand which of these there are. But if you're asking, does God ever tell anybody they're good? Yes, he said Job was good. Peter and then Dennis.
Yeah, I mean, if we can reason at all and think through any of this, we have free will.
Yes, unless it's an illusion. Now the question then too is whether you can reason about it and whether you can do it. That's some people will want to. So I don't. There are people who say it's possible that you thinking you have free will is an illusion. I think that's. Yeah, but were you predetermined to think about that was an illusion? So they would say the fact that you're thinking about whether it's an illusion or not was something that was just genetic predisposition and firing of atoms and quantum states and this kind of stuff. I don't. It's unlivable philosophy, and it's not well grounded. But and its groundings are the important part. But now we're back to epistemology and ontology, and for the sake of simplicity at this point, we'll avoid that topic until later. But you're right to put your finger on this as an issue.
You're talking about making choices now. I'm a little confused. You're talking about making choices between bad and good?
So what we talked about last time and where we are today right now is not bad and good. At this point, it's just choices. How do we go about making choices?
Some choices really are genetic. There's no way Michael Jordan could not have played basketball.
But I don't think that's true. I think what is true is Michael Jordan was so gifted that in certain environments he would be highly encouraged to play basketball. But if you see that guy's drive, it's not, guys with that kind of drive to succeed, whether they play basketball or whether they do something else, they will go after it to the greatest degree they possibly can. They will succeed hard or they will fail hard several times at something. But you can't say he couldn't do anything but play basketball.
No, I didn't say he couldn't do anything but there's no way he could not have played anything. He tried to play baseball too when he stunk.
Right. But again, what if he grew up, if Michael Jordan, instead of being born here, was born in India, he would have tried his hand at cricket, and if he was no good at cricket, and something else, and he may never found basketball, that kind of thing.
So, just so I understand, right now you're unpacking nature versus nurture piece of it, right?
Yeah.
And then so I think we're kind of conflating that at times with the frozen chosen or not, right? Like the ultimate, the life matters, if it's all predetermined, then why do we do anything, right? There are two separate pieces that we're talking about. What you're talking about is
Yeah, my objection that I'm trying to get past here is very much that, which is as soon as if I put out here and I said, okay, the topic's going to be free will versus God's sovereignty, I would be like, get up and sit at your tables. And people would have already gone and sat at them, and they're like, all right, now we're going to put up our fight for our respective views. We're going to get those determinist guys. We're going to get those free will guys. God, they don't understand God's sovereignty. How dare they? They don't understand God's character. How dare they? And the battle line's already drawn. If that's what you want to do, fine. Go sit at your table and be prepared. But to the rest of you who are genuinely interested in thinking about how do I know that what I believe on this is correct, I'm trying to do that exercise here of how do we examine our beliefs so that, let me tell you one of the most common feedback points I get in Solid Ground. It's the following. For years, I always believed X is true. I realized I never really thought about it. And having thought about it, now I don't think X is true. Or alternately, having thought about it, now I understand why X is true, and it's so much easier to follow it, and I'm so much more bought into following it because I understand why it's true now. And I get more of the latter than I do the former. So hopefully this isn't just a big class in confirmation bias. But ultimately, if the arguments are there, you ought to at least, as Paul says, be prepared to give an argument for the hope that's in you. You ought to, or reasons, he says, for the hope that is in you. That includes the reasoning behind why you think this. So, hey, this is just the doctrine I believe in. That's not an argument. And the Bible says so. That's also not an argument, because unless the other team is like, yep, Bible doesn't say so, but I believe it anyway. But on both sides of those issues, you have serious PhD, I've been doing this for 200 years, theologians on both sides of that issue. So it's not as simple as to say, well, those guys aren't biblical Christians, or those guys aren't biblical Christians. Both guys claim to be biblical Christians and claim to do the different. Now, which one of them is right? Now, why which one of them is right? If this were a class in philosophy, we would be doing things differently. This is not a class in philosophy. This is a class whose heart and soul is about practicality. Great, here are the philosophical issues. What do I do about it? What I don't want Solid Ground to ever be, it's not my desire that we ever are a navel-gazing echo chamber. What the goal here is for you to walk out and have been dared, to be challenged, to be told, if you believe this thing, you have no business not doing these following things. That is to say, if you really do believe this stuff, stop talking about it and go do it. And part of the go do it is, in my opinion, stripping away the things that cause people to despair that they can't do it, or that they won't do it, or that it's not for them to do. If the master commanded it, you can do it. Now, it's about that simple to me, but again, that's not an argument. I got to make an argument that that's the case. So I will tell you at the end of the day, my own position on this one is, each one of you independent wills, has the ability to choose to do the right thing instead of the wrong thing. Now, in the same way that kid, there are some kids, and this is the point I was getting at. Consider the following two kinds of kids in high school. Consider Mary Lou Retton in high school, or junior high, or whenever she probably started in grade school, and consider Sally in grade school. Both of whom said, I want to do gymnastics. Both of whom's parents said, you can do gymnastics. And let's say both of whom were talented enough to do gymnastics. So it's not, I don't believe that it's the case that people become world-class athletes, or if you don't like the idea of athlete, pick anything else you want, business person, of entrepreneur, the kind of thing, that they don't become those things because the world is like, the Olympians are out there and you just filter them out. Some people who have the ability to do this stuff never do it. Some of the people, and by the way, I know somebody like that. I know a guy, not on the Olympic side, on the academic side, who's an off-the-chart genius and has not really realized the vast majority of that potential. I know other guys who are 20 IQ points lower than that dude who have done amazing stuff with their minds. So it's not simply down to talent. And if you think it is just down to gifts and talent, I can point you to 100 examples where that's not the case. So some of it does have to do with drive. And is that drive given to you, or do you create that drive yourself, or do people help create the drive together? And I'm here to tell you that, yes, some people are more motivated than others. Some people are more likely, that have a personality that's just like obsessive about things, and they're going to drive at it. People who are obsessive are not the only people who succeed. People who are obsessed are not the only people who succeed. And in fact, success if you define success as like being a CEO, I'm not a huge fan of Jordan Peterson on his religious side, but he has some interesting, compelling things to say on a psychological side to me. He says the reason that men succeed, I'm going to hash this up, the reason men are CEOs more frequently than women are because they choose to basically obsess about this particular lifestyle, and women, and he says rightly so, tend to be more reasonable than men are. He says the question ought not be, why aren't more women CEOs? The question ought to be, why does anybody in the world think that this is a good idea? I mean, apparently what his belief is, he's talked to CEOs and none of them are happy, and anybody who is, I'm talking the big dogs, anybody who does that has not chosen the best path towards happiness. And why would you do that? So he doesn't necessarily think that's a good thing. So don't let that be your definition of success, not because Jordan Peterson says so, but because if you turn around and say to yourself, do I want to be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, or do I want to be a well-respected, happy, virtuous member of my community? which one would you choose? Hopefully the latter. If not, come talk to me afterwards. We'll debate the merits either way. But if your goal is success, and you define what success is by the following: I want to make every morally good choice in my life. For the following reason: I think that making all morally good choices is the fastest path to happiness, heaven, which is happiness, is just representative in many ways of happiness for ourselves, that ultimately I want to do the right thing. If any of that rings true to you, if you just want to be, look, I want to do the right thing, that's what this discussion's about. How do we go about doing the right thing?
Well, I understand that you're making the class, right? But
Yes.
you are taking the assumption that you are knowing what is best.
That I'm doing what is best in this class?
I mean, what is good and what is not? I don't think that you wait enough to say what does God say and what is good and not.
Steve, we're gonna get there. Be patient with me. We can't. You're asking me to do this, if I understand you right. Here's what God says is the right thing to do. Is right. Okay. Now, do you believe? With your permission, let me pick on you for a second. And by the way, every question I'm going to ask you, you're going to answer exactly the same way that I would answer it too. So let me pick on us together. God says this is right, and ultimately, what we need to do is to do it. We need to obey. Okay, so don't sit there and logic your way to it, Scott. Don't sit there and think how's the best way to approach this one. You just do what God says. You agree so far? You're like, no, I don't agree. This is a trap. Whatever it is, the answer is no. Do you?
Actually, you know what God's going to say, so
You're saying you don't know what?
you read the Bible and you ask God what it says, and you come up with the answer and the wrong answer. I don't know.
Okay, well, let me. You'll remember Mike Minter. You've been around here long enough. You probably heard this in a sermon. Mike talking about a guy that walked into his office and said, "I've been reading Romans a lot recently, and I think that God wants me to leave my wife." Okay, so here's a guy who walks into the pastor of a church and says, "From reading the Bible, I've determined that I should divorce my wife." Now, obviously, that guy's, to you and me, is way off.
They're like 2 points. Some of you know what God is the right way to do forever.
Say that one more time, Steve.
Do you not understand what God is telling humanity how to behave?
My point by bringing this example up, Steve, is that 2 people can look at the same scripture and come away with 2 completely different conclusions as to what God is saying to do. You agree with that statement? Okay. If you agree with that statement, then one of the questions there are 2 key things to ask. One is, how do we differentiate between which one of these viewpoints is the right one, or some third viewpoint we haven't even brought up? So how do we determine which is the right one? And secondly, why bother? I haven't even gotten to that point, Steve. That one's like next time or the next time. Today's question is, should I even bother at all trying? Because if I can't change my mind, if I'm just part of an avalanche rolling down the hill, and it doesn't matter what, I mean, in a full-scale avalanche, it doesn't matter where you run, you're going to end up at the bottom of the mountain anyway. And if that's the way that our choices are, well, then do whatever. But if it is the case that the world can slip around you and you can remain standing on the mountain, the question is how? How do you do it? And that's what we're answering first, is I want to go into the discussion about what does God say is right, with having considered the following question is this: can I even choose?
So that's the question we're on now, right?
Can I even choose is the question we're talking about right now. Or is this all just preset?
But if you look at the part of religion, and says that's the right choice.
I didn't say he would say that was the right choice. I think we all agree that Eve made the wrong choice. The question I'm asking now, if you want to translate that into that one, is, did Eve really choose? Or was it all a setup? That's the question that I'm asking at this point. And I admire your eagerness to get to the truth. I have that same eagerness, but just trust me for one period here that asking this question will be helpful when we get to the right answer. Steve, we ain't going to disagree on the answer. I mean, if anybody wants to know where this class ends, it's, hey, we're going to all figure out how to do exactly what God says to do as outlined in the Bible and in revelation of the Holy Spirit to you. So that's where we're going with this one. That's where we're going to end on it. unless Dennis can take us off that path. That's where we're going. But how do we get there matters. And I'll tell you how we get there matters. And I'm going to pick on a few of my Reformed buddies, and I'm going to pick on a few of my free will buddies. My Reformed buddies, because of their mindset, they end up doing bad things because when you boil it down to it, when you say, why do you keep doing these things? They say, it's my sin nature that makes me do it. And I'm like, that's false. That's not true. You are in this, and it may be the case that that's the truth, that their sin nature makes them do it, but it's not the case that they can't resist that sin nature and do the right thing, biblically speaking. Okay? And I also see free will guys turn around there and say, I'm at complete liberty. I can do whatever I want. The laws of God are no longer valid. Look at what Paul says, law of liberty, et cetera, et cetera. And they take this thing and they live lives that are not indistinguishable from secular people. But if you say, where's the Christian focus here? Where's the focus? What are you trying to do with your life? Their answer is, well, God says we can do anything that we want, so I'm doing whatever I want as long as it, and that's not right either. There has to be some thing in the middle that says, God has a plan for my life. He wants me to do A, and if I don't do A, he wants me to do B, and if I don't do B, he wants me to do C, and you can run all the way down this thing, and the measure of a man or woman is how many bad choices did you make versus how many good choices did you make. Now, I'm not saying that you're judged on that for purposes of salvation. What I am saying is you're judged on that based on purposes of reward, at a minimum. And if you're interested in that, then continue to listen. If not, then object when you wish.
At the risk of going in the wrong direction here, feel free to correct me. So the biggest frustration I have, I'll create this analogy. So you got scientists and you got folks who are religious, right? And
Yes.
one thinks that the other, like they think that one is the bipolar opposite or the diametric opposite of the other, right?
Yes.
So when we're talking about free will as determinism, like I just want to throw it out there, like the Adjustment Bureau, like and programming emergence, right?
Yes.
Like I think there's probably, so in my personal belief, I feel like there's a compromise between the two,
Yes?
but I want to dig down into why. Like that's the end conclusion. That's my position. If you put me at two tables, I'm going to sit in between them.
Yes.
I want to know why I'm sitting in between them.
Yeah, so good. That's what I'm trying to do here. So let me, you've taken a diversion right onto my chosen topic. So, yep, go ahead.
The problem is that you're taking chosen choices.
Yes.
You're not asking why.
No, the choices are one. So in the ones that he set out there, Adjustment Bureau, I forgot what was the second example.
Emergence.
Emergence. So the concepts there are: is there a Wizard of Oz pulling all the levers in secret behind it, making you do these things, or are you actually choosing to do them yourself? So the reason he's asking this question is this, and I'll put it in directly religious terms for you. If God's going to do whatever he wants with your life, and your choices don't matter per se in that sense, because he's just going to get done whatever he wants to get done, then why bother putting any effort or thought into choosing? Okay, if God's really going to just get it done, whatever he wants done, then why bother, why worry about it? Why even think about it? Good grief, why come to this class and discuss it?
Because God created a universe that has a plan.
Agreed?
If humans reject God, that is a violation. It has nothing to do with definition of theology of anything.
No, it's not. That's not true, Steve. If humans choose, listen to this. If humans choose to violate the will of God, then that makes false the whole viewpoint that says all that happens is God's will. Do you see that? It's if God wills this stuff. Now, if humans choose A, then that's in accordance with what God wills. If humans choose B, it's not in accordance with what God wills. You just use the term if human chooses not to follow God, that's violating God's will. But that's not at least one viewpoint out there. There's one viewpoint out there of kind of strict determinism in Reformed theology and others that says all is as God wills, and the human choices where it looks like they're choosing the wrong thing, they are in fact choosing exactly what God determined that they would choose and wants them to choose. They're vessels of wrath. They were built for that reason. They're there to choose the wrong thing, and that's what God wants them to do. It's all part of God's plan. There is a reason why God wants that to happen. The question is, did those people have a choice in it? That's the question I'm asking today. Did those people have a choice in it?
Well, that is exemplified in several different ways.
I'm like John, I'm a scientist, and I'm pretty sure that I can get up and walk out of this room if I want. I mean, I'm pretty sure I have free will, but I've read an awful lot of scientific stuff that shows evidence for free will being an illusion. So I'd be sitting at this table with John in between, like.
All right, so let's talk about that in between table for a little bit here.
Yeah, real quick before
Yeah.
we dive in, so what I mean by the in-between table, what I mean is there is a plan, right? Like you've got, so it's bounds, right? You've got a left and right limit. Within that left and right limit, you can ping pong it back and forth. At the end of the day, you're going to get to an end point, but you've got the freedom of how you maneuver to that end point. So that's kind of the compromise, but I don't know if that necessarily passes muster.
So I think you're thinking in the right direction, but that's not strictly true. If you're going to assert, so Al's going to object, and probably Steve's going to object, but Al's going to object of when God says, no, I'm just, ultimately you're going to end up all over the map here, but I'm going to determine your final point. That kind of punts on God's sovereignty over the interim period. And Al's going to say, guys that take Al's position, or some position similar to Al's position, are going to say things like, everything that occurs is within the sovereign will of God. And by sovereignty, I mean the following things. So yes, I think that's true, what you said, but I think that the in-between points matter. Now the question, though, is, well, okay, let's get to it. So we're gonna ask the question of, do we really choose something? So let's imagine, if we can, a choice. And so that we're not cheating on this one quite yet, we'll make it a moral choice. Okay, here's a moral choice. It is the case right now that you can choose. I'm talking about moral things here. I'm talking about moral things, and I'm making specific recommendations, or I'm leading discussion in a certain way about moral things. You might be sitting in this class and saying, sitting here discussing this stuff is a good idea. Why? Well, there may be three reasons why sitting here and discussing it is a good idea. One is to know. That is to say, am I doing the right thing? Is my own viewpoint on this right? The second one may be to say, I disagree with what's going on. I'm here to fight. And the third one may be, is I'm here to please. And to please means I'm here because of my husband, wife, father, mother, son, daughter, whatever else. I'm here to make somebody else happy. Okay? Sitting here is a moral choice if and only if you think that spending your time in a good way and sitting under instruction or sitting in a discussion group for an intended purpose is a good thing or a bad thing. If you don't think that's a moral choice, then I picked a bad one, but I'm using the immediate example here for reasons that'll become obvious. Okay, and then maybe there are more, but let's say there are at least those three. If you're here to know, now that's basically of, is my viewpoint on this right or is it wrong? Okay, that may be one right here. Is it right or is it wrong? Now, if you're asking, is it right or is it wrong, why are you asking this question? Ostensibly, you're asking this question because I want to do right, and I do not want to do wrong. So if I want to do right, that's my intention right here. So my question now is, do right, but how? How do I go about doing it right? So you are here, you may be sitting here to know what's right and wrong, as Steve says. Let's do that first, what's right and wrong, then you can decide whether you're going to do it or not. But let's say that you to know how to, about right or wrong choices, how do I do the right thing? Now I assume, I won't put it up there, that nobody's in here because they want to do the wrong thing and they just want to figure out a better way to do it. Okay, that's your goal. Okay, but let me know. Another possibility is if I want to know whether doing right or wrong is something that I can do, or whether my choice or my will is bound. So my point there is, I'm here to know whether in doing things right and wrong, not how do I do right, but rather if doing things right, and it's possible that in thinking about doing things right or wrong, I don't even have a choice. So I'm basically a spectator as to whether I'm doing things right and wrong. And to put that in immediately accessible and relevant terms, it means this: do you think you even have a choice about sitting in here? Dennis says he believes it, maybe it seems intuitively that he thinks he can get up and walk out. Is that the case? Is he really just fooling himself? Maybe he can't. Maybe he thinks that he can walk out of here, but the bottom line is he's trapped. And you're all trapped. That's it. You couldn't get up and walk out if you really wanted to. Just not going to happen. And in fact, you won't even want to, because it's all just programming. You're doing what your DNA says. You're doing what your spiritual nature says. It's completely determined. You don't have any choice. You literally, and this is the point I'm making here, you literally can't choose to stand up and leave. Or alternately, you really can't choose to sit if what you're going to do anyway, if the determined thing to do is for you to get up and walk out. Then when that happens, it wasn't a choice either. So this is the question I'm asking you is what you're doing right now. Now I'm putting it in moral terms. In fact, I'll say the following. If you're sitting here and I'm leading you down the wrong path, you probably ought to get up and walk out. If you're here to know. If you're here to fight, that's different. But if you're here to know and I'm walking you down the wrong path, you need to leave for your own moral health. Now, if you're here to know and you think that in believing right or wrong, you have a way to do right, you might ask the question of, should I sit here or should I not? And that's a legitimate question. At any rate, okay. So if you're here to fight, you can see how this breaks down into, is this a right or wrong issue at all? And if it is a right or wrong issue, do I have a choice? Notice where we end up on here. How do I fight? Might be a question you ask. Do I sit here and continue to fight, or do I get up and walk out, and that my protest in walking out is the best fight I can make? Or alternately, you might say to yourself, well, I'm here to fight, but I don't really have a choice about that. I just know that I'm here to fight, so my will is bound. And the point I'm going to make is all of these questions are going to reduce at some level here to the exact same question. Can I even do it? That's the question I'm trying to ask here is this somehow predetermined? Are you deterministic, or do you have free will? How do I fight? How do I do right? How do I please? These are all questions that presume that you can choose to sit or stand up. Now, let's go to the question of, how do you know? How do you know whether you have the ability to sit or to stand up? I'll offer you a little bit of evidence first, and the evidence is stuff like Dennis says and I say, and we end up saying kind of at the end of it, I'll throw up my hands and does this lead us to the answer? Well, maybe, maybe not, but here's what you say, is this. It seems, okay, so point one, is it seems I can choose. Yep, it's a properly basic belief. That is to say, I'm reasonable to hold this belief until somebody shows me a defeater for it. That is to say, I know if you feel like you're living in this world But let me unplug you from the matrix. Look, you're actually in the matrix, okay? So if you woke up, if you took the red pill, because you wanted, is it the red pill? Which pill takes you to, red pill. If you took the red pill and Morpheus says, I'm going to show you how far the rabbit hole goes. And he pulls you out, and next thing you know, you get dumped down the sewer and picked up by a thing, and they're like, by the way, welcome to the real world. All of that was an illusion. That's a defeater for your belief that you were living in the real world. Okay, now you've got a good reason to believe it's not the case. Okay, so it seems that I can choose. That is, and maybe we'll say this, properly basic belief. And so maybe we can say that's a fair default position. Now, if it's a fair default position, then you're actually rational to continue to hold that position until somebody proves otherwise. Now, Dennis might say, look, let me give you some other proof. Otherwise, not Dennis, I'm picking on Dennis. He said it here. Other people would certainly say, there's some evidence out there that suggests this is the case. Here's some neurobiological evidence that says when a person makes a choice, we see motor neurons and stuff fire, and then we see cognitive function happen that says, I choose right. And this shows that this thing moved first and that the brain then decided that it was going to choose. So what was actually happening there? Well, the brain has obviously, they will say, tricked itself into believing that it's making a choice when in reality it was predetermined by the brain what was going to happen, and it fooled itself into thinking that you thought that. Okay? That sounds like a defeater for that belief, and let's call that a defeater for your belief. Now, the question is, do you have, as the properly basic belief guy would say, Alvin Plantinga, do you have a defeater for that belief? Let me offer you another perspective here. There are engineers in this class. If you're an engineer and you're going to design an autonomous system with intelligence, you have built a real AI, okay? You can make the robot and the robot can choose. And you program the robot and you're so interested in this robot surviving and making choices and eventually making certain choices, okay? Let's say that that's the case. And so you got real AI in this robot. And you want to engineer something. You want to engineer a robot that's not going to get destroyed in the world that it lives in. So it works in a steel foundry, molten steel pouring around, think Terminator, wherever he goes, into the thing. One of those kind of hazardous work environments. And you say to yourself, and you say to that robot, you program that robot. Do you program that robot that when, imagine now this major crushing wheel is rolling and he's not paying attention. He's put his hand on this wheel track and he's just waiting. And he feels something touch the corner of his finger. And he jerks his hand out of the way. That's a good design. Why is that a good design? Before he even knows why, he's pulled his hand out of the way because that's a preservation instinct. All right? And then if you say, did you choose to move your hand out of the way? He'd be like, yeah, I felt something, I pulled it out of the way. Well, did he make that choice? No. In fact, that was kind of predetermined. And so what you say there is that is a engineering reaction ought to be the following, that there will be physical motor neuron and muscular activation that occurs without cognitive choice. Because if you don't have that, you've got robots who are really good at choosing who don't have any fingers. And that makes them less good at choosing to play the piano later. So if those kinds of things are things you want your robots to be able to do, you have to build that in. So now that wasn't this particular test that I'm talking about, this particular study, wasn't looking to do that. What it was looking to do is to say, you make a selection about whether to choose left or to choose right. Now, which one is it? Choosing left and choosing right are not moral decisions. So these are not the kinds of decisions, and they're not decisions, in this case, in the way they set up in the test, that have any actual consequences on the other side of which you would make moral estimates. So for that reason, if you were engineering a robot, you ultimately want him making his moral choices in the front, you want him making his wisdom choices in the front, you want him making his long-term strategy choices in the front. You don't want him making steer the car left or right choices in the front. And by the way, another example of this actually happens is think of yourselves when you text and drive or talk on the phone and drive or do anything and are distracted and drive. I'm sure everybody has done it or does it. Have you ever steered out of the way of something and then you looked around and adrenaline's hit you, so you got an adrenaline shock, you steered out of the way of something, you're like, oh, I'm glad that I didn't do X, continue to drive or turn left. I somehow turned right and steered around this thing because my peripheral vision caught it and it basically told me without engaging executive function, you need to do the following things. Yes, and at some point later, I'll talk about a particular study that we did. I've mentioned in this class before that speaks exactly to this. But I will say, in now summary, when you start engaging, what do I do about the system that is in place that doesn't require an immediate action, then you see executive function happen first and motor neurons firing second. That's not an indication of determinism, that's an indication of proper engineering. Any system that did not include those two functions was engineered by somebody that doesn't understand these systems at all very well. That would be a reason, in my opinion, to disbelieve that God's a good engineer, if he engineered things in a way that didn't show that thing first. So whether you agree with that or don't agree with that, it's at least a plausible defeater for the defeater of the position, right? It's not a certain thing, but that's all I'm saying at this point. Okay, so it seems that I can choose. And if we ask the question of, all right, what if, here's a little bit of a reductio, if I can't actually choose, okay, there's no choice to be made. It's all illusion. It's all illusion. Okay, so I can't choose. I think that I can, but it's all illusory, okay? In fact, remember what the illusion includes. The illusion includes you thinking that you made the choice and being either happy or sad with your choice. All right, so what should you do if it's the case? What, practically speaking, ought you do if you can't actually choose what to do? And what else? What else might you choose to do or not choose to do? Why are you asking the question? Why does this concern you? Somebody tell me why you're interested in this topic.
Because if we're all just chemicals interacting and we've got then there is no moral, there's no right and wrong. So I could go shoot somebody in the head and it would be okay.
Okay. But let's say that you don't believe that. You don't believe that's the case. Okay? And in fact, you believe that you ought to do the right thing. And so you want to choose to do the right thing. Now I'm telling you secretly, Eric's back there. You think that he's doing media for this class. He's actually programming your answers. He's typing them in right before you get them. And I can take you back to the screen and show you what you just said. He typed in 30 seconds before and hit go on it. Now why do you care?
I don't care anymore.
Okay. So you're not worried about it anymore. You're just like, okay, I guess I'll be happy because I'm going to continue to pursue what I think that I'm pursuing. I'm pretending that I pursue it, and I'm happy pretending to continue to pursue it.
Shooting somebody in the head would ruin Hannibal Lecter's.
If you can't choose the rational thing to do, even though calling it rational is illusory, the rational thing to do is not to worry about it. Okay, so stop worrying. If you're entirely determined what to do, don't give it another thought. Do not even bother thinking about it. Now, how's that work for you? Not so good? That's another indication that you can in fact choose. Because if this was purely deterministic and your worrying was determined, you oughtn't, at a minimum, now here's where it goes next level, and it takes a little bit to think through this. You shouldn't worry about worrying. You shouldn't meta worry. You shouldn't uber worry. Okay, so this is actually how you prove this is an argument against the brain and the mind are the same things, is that they have these intentional states. The fact that you think about thinking, it's not the fact that you think that matters. It's the fact that you think about thinking that indicates an intentional state. It's not the fact that you worry that matters. It's the fact that you worry about whether you ought to worry that matters.
Did you say that's why the brain and the mind are the same?
I'm saying that's the intentionality argument is an argument against people who say the brain and the mind are the same thing. So if you worry about worrying, if you think about thinking, your default position ought to be that you can in fact choose because you're choosing to worry about worrying. All right, now I know that sounds a little bit too, but any level other than worrying, that is worrying about worrying or worrying about worrying about worrying, or for you poor OCD folks out there, worrying about worrying about worrying about worrying, any of those things right there, if you're doing anything from level 2 on up, you have free will. Go now figure out what you're going to do with it.
You and I have been down this road for years, and I'm not going to go down that road.
You keep choosing to go down this path. I don't have a choice about it.
I've got because we're running out of time, I got a much better moral conundrum. The train question.
Yes. Now wait, you need to wait to train question until next time because that's step 2 stuff. Okay. All right, so what I want to point out to you is this, so let's call it, we'll call this second level worry. This is an indicator to you that free will is there, all right? Now here's the last thing. Here's the last thing that I would bring up for you. If it's the case, remember, all of the question we're trying to ask here is not what choice should we make. We're asking the question, do we even choose at all? Do we even choose at all? Why do you, except for Dennis, maybe even including Dennis, although he'd get upset if I made that point rigid, why do you think that you worry about this? Al, you can tell me. Why do you think you worry about this?
Because if my choices aren't real, it obliterates my idea of what I am.
Okay, well, okay, maybe you have an existential crisis, but let's be terribly pragmatic about it. Yeah. If Steve's right, and that there actually is right and wrong out there, why do you care about choosing right and wrong stuff?
Okay. Then why do I care about choosing the right thing?
Yes. I mean, why do you do it? You just taught a whole class on why you do it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could say that the first thought is just the right thing is the right thing, and I know I've done a lot of the wrong thing.
But what happens if you do the right thing? What happens if you do the wrong thing? What does it result in? I mean, I don't.
Consequences?
Yeah, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you taught a whole class on it matters what happens. Heaven and hell matter. I mean, at the end of the day, the reason we're all sitting in here is that we think that there's a God that holds you accountable for it. Yeah. Dennis says there's no God that holds you accountable, in which case, but the bottom line is, what happens, it matters what right choices you make. So it doesn't mean that Dennis is now like, well, it doesn't matter what right choices I make. He's got his own reasons for it. But at the end of the day, the reason we worry about this is whether you do right or wrong matters in the long run. And so that's why we want to have a...
You can't choose.
Yes.
Right or wrong doesn't matter. You just are.
Wait, you're one step ahead of me.
All right.
So here's my point, is if it matters, that is to say, there are consequences. There's a God, or there's not a God, or there's a gigantic monkey, or there's a computer programmer, or whatever it is. It matters what you choose to that being. So it's ultimately, 1 second, Peter. The results matter. Okay. Now, because of the environment we're sitting in here, which is principally this is being done in a Christian worldview milieu, the question that we're going to ask is basically, the results, what God has to say about it, as Steve wants to say, rightly so. It matters because if you have the ability to choose right or wrong, God's going to hold you accountable for that, okay? Accountability. Say again. Okay, all right, fair enough. It is the words I'm putting back in your mouth are the ones I thought I heard, which is moral right and wrong matter. And what God says is what's morally right and morally wrong.
My choice is, once I become a Christian, I know that I need to follow Jesus. There is no why.
There's no why?
There is no...
Worry. Right, no, but there's a why. I'm not talking about worry now. Now I'm talking about why. Forget, worry was point 2. So the bottom line is, if there's a why here, it's ultimately that Jesus says to do it. Is that fair? Okay, so Jesus says to do it, and he also says that he's going to hold us accountable for it. Yes, he does. Absolutely. And that is not he who says he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Not he who says he will do the will of my Father in heaven. There are many who say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not do these things and in your name do it? He says, depart from me, you evildoer, you practicers of lawlessness. John says, to he who believes, and what is the will of the Father? To believe in him who the Father has sent. So it does matter what we do. It's not just willy-nilly. God's like, these are sheep and these are goats, and there's a distinguishing factor, and there's a judgment day. On Judgment Day, what's opened? Does anybody, what is opened on Judgment Day? The books. What's in the books? Everything that we have done. Everything we have done is in the books. Now, this is not a works-based salvation thing, but the choices we make matter. We'll discuss this more next time, but let's look back at the verses and see if it is the case that what we do matters. But ultimately, and then we'll get Peter's comment, if it's the fact that God's going to hold us accountable, okay, then there's a reason for you to think about these things, to worry about them, so to speak. Not to worry, but to be concerned with them. That I want to do the right thing, I want to do the wrong thing because Jesus tells me to do it, and because Jesus promised me these things if I did them and I don't do them. Or it's ultimately, if you don't have a choice and there's a God who's going to hold you accountable, there's no way to resist his will at all. Right? So if it's just God makes me do it, is there any point in worrying about it if God makes you do it? So God, the most powerful being even conceivable, has decided you're going to do the wrong thing. How much worrying does it take to resist that? There's no amount. You can't worry your way out of that particular power struggle. You're going to lose. So in the case that God makes me do it, or the case that you can't choose, the results are the same. Don't worry. If you're going to hell, you're going to hell. Don't worry about it. If you're going to heaven, you're going to heaven. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's okay. Now, everybody's in here, and people want to talk about this topic because they are worried about it, because they're concerned about it. I take this, in conjunction with this right here, as this is my philosophical ground in believing that we have free will. That's why I believe we have free will. It's a properly basic belief based on what seems obviously true to me at the time, for which I have no convincing defeater. And when I'm tempted to not be concerned with it, I realize that the only reasons that I can think of to not be concerned with it are either that I can't actually choose anyway and it's all an illusion, in which case, if it's all an illusion, guess what? All of this worry is meaningless because I'm just a meat sock and we're going to die and it doesn't matter. Or God makes me do it and there's nothing I can do about it, in which case everything is determined and there's no point in worrying about it and there's no point in being concerned about it. Okay? These don't match up with this. Properly basic belief that I have free will does not match up with this right here. This violates my properly basic belief that I have free will. Do I have a defeater that helps me believe this? Well, we'll look at the scriptural data and see if there's a defeater there. But as of right now, I want to point out that on the results side, that my belief that I can choose has grounds in, has a reason to pursue it because it matters, because of what God says, and because I don't believe that, because I recognize that I'm worried about worrying about it, and that also supports it. So I have a supporting point here, and one interpretation gives me a supporting point here. So really all this boils down, I don't think that we need to be concerned about whether we have free will. This is my point. I don't think we need to be concerned about whether we have free will so much, because our going in point ought to be that we have free will and we don't have a reason to disbelieve it yet that's been brought up, or one, even a good one that I can think of. And if it's the case that we do have free will, it boils down to these two. Can we do something about it? And God tells us to do something about it. Can we not do anything about it? And my point to you here is, in any case, if you're worrying, whether you're right or you're wrong, you still believe in free will. Look at this up here and tell me, if you're worried about it, how philosophically that's consistent with believing that you can't do anything about it. Am I making myself clear, or should I try one more time? Should somebody nod if I'm making sense?
Well, you're certainly
Okay, all right. So if I've got a takeaway from today, and then we'll start the next class from this point. This is the takeaway point. If you will leave here after all of this and say, whatever, let me tell you, I want to do the right thing, and I'm concerned about how to do the right thing. If you did that, good. That's where we're going to go next time. How do we do the right thing? But I'm going to reference this later, because someone's going to bring up the point later of, well, I can't really choose anyway. I'm going to say, no. Philosophically speaking, you're now inconsistent. If you're going to tell me that you're philosophically speaking, that you can't do something about it, philosophically speaking, you can't do something about it, I'm going to ask you if you're worried about doing the right thing or the wrong thing. And your answer had better be, no, I'm not worried about it at all. And if that's true, say it. Good. Now we've got one person we can talk about like that. If it's not true, I just want to point out to you, if you're still questioning it, it means you still believe in free will, where free will means you can actually choose. Yes?
Just to clarify my position, worry, I believe we are biochemical reactions in the sac of flesh. And worry is just a biochemical reaction.
Right, so you're a point 2 guy. You can't choose. And so you
I'm not saying that either.
No, I'm saying that. I'm saying that of the 3 things up here, it seems like I can choose. You do believe that. But in reality, you can't choose. It's all biochemical. This is predetermined.
No, I said worry.
Worry. I'm talking.
Worry is a biochemical reaction.
Right. Are you?
Evolutionarily produced in us.
Can you worry about whether you are you thinking about whether? If I'll tell you this, I don't think you should worry. Or hey, you should worry. Do you think that there's a choice about whether you should worry or shouldn't worry?
I think I'm trying to make my position that worry, this is just a biochemical reaction.
I understand. I'm asking you the following question. I understand your position. Worry is a biochemical reaction. Now, can you worry about whether you ought to worry at all?
That's a biochemical reaction.
Okay, I'm asking you, can you worry about whether you can worry at all?
Can I be subject to a biochemical reaction? Yes.
I understand that. You said that. I'm asking you, can you worry about worrying? Can you have a biochemical reaction about a biochemical reaction? You can?
Sure.
Okay, if you have a biochemical reaction about a biochemical reaction, that's an intentional state. And then I'll refer everybody to our discussions about intentionality.
Okay, I feel like playing devil's advocate, I feel like people would just say, oh, well, God planted all of this in us
Yes.
so that you would think we had free will, but we actually don't.
Yes.
Kind of like we think, as far as time is concerned, we're going in a linear direction.
Right.
So how do you argue against that? Because I feel like the whole worry thing is kind of circular reasoning.
Okay. This deserves a long answer, and we're going to start the next class with exactly that question. I'll talk for probably 5 to 10 minutes on exactly that topic, because that's the right question, in my opinion, to ask to get us to move from where we are right now to the next point. So, Eric, mark whatever time this is in the deal, because we need to answer exactly that question. Peter, last word goes to you.
Yeah, if we didn't have free will, there wouldn't be any temptation either. And I don't see why God would bother telling us to do anything.
So we'll, in pursuit of this question, we'll unpack that statement of, do we have any temptation? And if we do have temptation, then who's providing it? And then we'll get into the biblical data, because the biblical data will speak to it.
I mean, temptation itself wouldn't even exist. It wouldn't affect us in any way if we don't have free will.
Yeah, so Peter, as usual, you keep reading the notes from 2 classes in the future and using them to answer the questions of the present. I will give you something to think about here. And this was a prescient question as well, so stop cheating too. If all of this is just determined, then as Peter says, there's no actual temptation happening. Because temptation, the definition of temptation is someone who says to you, you could do the right thing, but I want you to choose to do the wrong thing, right? That's what temptation is. Temptation is, come do the wrong thing instead of doing the right thing. If there is no free will, if it's all determined, then temptation is an illusion. What's another word for an illusion? Is an illusion a true thing or a false thing? I'll leave you with that one to think about. Till next time. So we'll see you all next time. This is a great topic. Your feedback on this has been great. Steve, thank you for the courage to fight. You're doing a good job on the fighting side. Keep it up, because these things work best when fought about and tested. So keep it up. Thank you.
Oceans